Friday.
Let's do it.
Mackie and Judd Feedback Friday. So we got all kinds of questions here. Most of them, I'm trying to put these into categories, so that we can just be organized through our threads here. But a lot of stuff questioning Kwesi and whether he's in over his head or whether they were unprepared with the timing of free agency. They were so late hiring a head coach compared to the rest of the league. So let's get into some of these here. Jake Ward via the SKOR North app says, I may be overreacting, but I do feel like Kwesi is a bit over his head. That's not to say next year as he gains experience, you won't get better, but based on the current moves and signings, it seems like he isn't sure what to do and what moves to make. I feel as if the Kirk signing was a safe play and he's too worried about making a big splash. I saw a video the Vikings put out of Kwesi at the Combine. It seemed to me like he was just in awe of what was going on. I love how we're breaking down like Viking social media film here. He seemed like a nervous kid at school rather than a confident GM who knows what he's doing. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, he's young. So, yes, I think that he is, it's all new for sure. I don't even think he when he was with the Browns, went to the Combine. So, he did different things. Here's where I struggle here, and here's where we are totally guessing. Yes, I think that yes, I don't agree with a lot of stuff they are doing, but my question is, and this goes back to discussions that we've had for a month plus now, is who's in charge, who is doing what, and how much is Kwesi, and I guess to a certain point O'Connell as well, trying to fulfill the expectations of their bosses. Now, if you had more experience, you might say, hey, Wilfs, sit down for a second here. But I mean, these guys are young. They're not going to like that's just not, unfortunately, that's not going to be how this plays out right now. But I agree with being nervous if you're a Vikings fan about how this is going, because I don't agree with the steps that they're taking. But that being said, what we have no clue is behind the scenes, who is trying to influence and ultimately chart this thing. Because if what we've heard is correct, Phil, Kwesi for sure was more than open to listening on Kirk calls. Kirk Cousins calls were being taken. And it sounds like somebody said, oh, no, we can't. And that might have been the Wilfs. So I don't love that. In fact, I hate it. But that being said, I don't know that this is just as easy as saying one guy doesn't get it. I think this might be an organizational issue that needs to be worked through, or else it will eventually, or heck, it might now cause some problems.
I don't think he's in over his head. I think he is a victim of over collaboration, if you will, and which kind of goes to your point. This is more of a lot of cooks in the kitchen, a lot of decisions to be made. But based on the timing of what's been happening here, so the Kirk thing comes to fruition the eve of the tampering period opening up, and then the Thielen restructure comes to fruition 2 days after the league year opens up, and they're still trying to figure out the Danielle Hunter situation. Like, if their plan A was harmonious internally, all of these dominoes would have fallen into place a week ago, I think.
Yeah.
Think about how much of a pain in the ass it is right now. Well, they try to figure out these big, high-profile players and contract situations in the middle of all of this activity that's happening around the league. Like, they got their irons and some free agent fires here and there, and they're bringing in, like, for instance, they're bringing in this Buffalo Bills guard for a visit right now, according to reports, Ryan Bates. Which, by the way, I would be on board with him. He's 25 years old, and he's probably not going to cost you a ton, although he's a restricted free agent, which means you're going to have to be at the mercy of one of the Bills. But, they got those irons in the fire. They got their own internal guys, and it just kind of feels to me like they went back and forth internally and with Kirk's people for probably weeks and couldn't come to a consensus. And then they were talking to other teams about a trade. So it just feels like a ton of things to figure out, a ton of people with opinions organizationally, and then a ton of variables outside their control. And that's why it feels like they're just behind.
Yeah, that's probably true. But if you were to come tell me right now that you found out, hypothetically, that Kwesi said, let's run this thing back, I would say, oh boy, this is a problem. Like, he's not good. But I'm not convinced that's the case. I think that this is, but I do absolutely think whoever in that building was said, let's bring back Thielen. I mean, they've let go of no one so far. I think whoever is saying that doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think, the finalists for this job were Ryan Poles and Kwesi. And is there a good chance that, and this is sort of speculation, but is there a good chance that one of those two told the Wilfs what they wanted to hear, which is, we don't have to strip it down. We can kind of figure out a way. Let's keep, but there's some other questions within that vein here, so let's keep going here. Leonard Anderson via the SKOR North app. And you can always hit us up with questions, comments. This is probably the most questions and comments and takes that we've gotten through the SKOR North app in the last 2 years. It's incredible. And so apologies if we don't get to yours. It's just keep sending them in, and we try to get to as many as we can. So Leonard Anderson via the SKOR North app. I was born in 1961, the year the Vikings entered the league. I've been a loyal, heartbroken fan ever since. I want to share with you guys my opinion of the clown show that I think is taking place in the Vikings front office. The day Kwesi was introduced to the media, Kwesi was asked by a reporter point blank about his contract, giving Kwesi full power and authority over the roster and football operations. And Kwesi smiled, paused, and said, I know what my contract says, but I don't think it needs to be talked about or done that way. But he didn't really say what, right? So basically, I see it as his contract has been breached at least twice so far. Kwesi has been overruled on his head coach choice. The word is that he was the one pushing Harbaugh, for clarity.
Yep, I agree.
I'm starting to believe that Kirk will, and then the other thing was he's saying that he wanted to trade Kirk. And again, there's some shades of gray here, but he was definitely entertaining Kirk Cousins trade offers.
Sure.
I'm starting to believe that Kirk will retire from the Vikings at age 48, amassing over $1 billion from the Wilfs. I seriously doubt Kwesi's contract states that all decisions will be made democratically. When Kwesi said he wants collaborations, he explained what that means, but and then I think you get the point here.
Yeah.
That there's meddling is what his thought is, Leonard.
I think there's no question that that is 1,000% correct. Because yes, I mean Harbaugh is definitely driven by Kwesi, right? Like they go back to their Niners days. My guess is that Jim had ideas about how he would proceed, which didn't involve trying to bring back everyone. So yeah, I think that's right. And look, is Kwesi sort of, raw and green at this job? Absolutely. A dumb guy? Absolutely not. But at his age, he absolutely, I'm sure, and he got a great job, is being influenced in a way that if it's not positive is going to do damage.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'm not trying to dump on the guy. I have no idea. He might be great. Who knows, right? So like, I want to be clear here. He has the double speak that Falvey has too, and I get that, and that's the public stuff, and I don't know how to read that sometimes. Like that's like I don't think that you go home and talk like that. But as far as like as a person, I think he strikes me as a really, really smart guy, articulate for sure, lots of good things. Do I think that he is getting good guidance from those who have the right to give him guidance? Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I think that's the most fair thing that I can say.
No. Okay, I have another take off that, but I'm going to read this next question because it's all kind of thread together. Michael Hendricks via the YouTube comment section. Did Ryan Poles run to the Bears because Vikings ownership would not allow a complete rebuild? Is that why the Vikings hired who they did for a general manager and a head coach? I'm extremely concerned the Bears are going to hit the timing of Green Bay's descent with an insane amount of cap room and putting critical pieces in place. It's crushing to think the Bears are doing this right and the Vikings are now. I'm convinced it's and the Vikings aren't. I'm convinced it's ownership getting in the way. This is what I'm wondering, right? And Poles had options. So
well, I believe we have both heard that the bottom line was this: Poles was the Vikings' top choice.
Yeah,
and the financial offer to him was not sufficient.
Yes, I have heard that too.
So like that's what we have heard.
Now, Was there another element too of vision?
Maybe.
I think there's a really good chance because the Wilfs have been very public of wanting to model the Vikings after the Giants, after the Steelers. They want that consistency and stability. They don't want to be shuffling coaches every 2 years. They want to lock guys in. That's why Zimmer stuck around for 8 years and Spielman for 16 years. And so they want that stability. They don't want to just like get into a tailspin of firing and tanking and all this stuff. So what I think happened is ownership in these discussions with Poles and with Kwesi said, all right, we definitely need someone to come in here and freshen up the ideas and the culture and everything. But we also really would like to avoid a tank and going into like a total strip down because we do pride ourselves on at least being competitive year in and year out. So with that as the backdrop, what are your thoughts on this GM job that's open, right? Like, I think
we want Kirk Cousins back.
If you're Kwesi, you could look at this and say, well, and I don't think the owners demanded that Kirk had to come back, but I do think they were hesitant to just get rid of Kirk and then have a complete blank unknown canvas going into a quarterback draft that doesn't really have a lot of day one ready to start plug and play options. Mm-hmm. Now, were there paths to bridge quarterbacks like Mariota, Bridgewater? Like, of course there were. But I think the ownership has looked at this and said, if there's any way that we can stay competitive, upgrade via coaching, make some tweaks and retool, and then maybe draft a quarterback down the road, that would be preferable. And so if you're Kwesi and you're in that spot, you say, all right, well, I want the job, right? Like I can do it one of two ways. I can strip this down, and I'd be happy to just clear out $150 million in cap space for 2023 and find a quarterback. And quite frankly, that's probably the highest upside, quickest way to do this. If you want to do it that way, all right. I mean, it's going to be harder because you got a quarterback taking up still, even with the pay cut, or with not the pay cut, with the restructure, taking up a huge percentage of the cap. It's going to be harder, but if that's what you want, all right, we can do that too because I'm a flexible guy.
So my frustration resides far more with the Wilfs, and because I think that the scenario, Phil, that you just laid out, I think is probably right. And it's incredibly frustrating because I understand you don't want to suck. Okay. It's not fun. I get that completely.
Yeah.
And to voice the fears of the fans, I understand that you do not want to become the Jets or Lions. That's terrible. But all of that being said, if you own a business, football, baseball, grocery store, if you own a business and you fire the people who are really the most instrumental, like you fire your GM and your coach, which in a grocery store would be what? The GM and the manager below that person. All right. So you fire them both. Don't you say, I just made two huge changes that are now going to, at the very least, require a reset where the new people are going to come in and look at my employees, my business practices, and like they're going to have suggestions. And if I trust them and they're smart, their suggestions are probably going to take me to a place I have not been. It feels like the Wilfs are standing in the way of that. This is where I'm confused.
I think there's so much gray here. I legitimately think Kwesi, Kwesi's probably thinking, there's definitely a couple different ways we can do this, just like I just said. And we can keep Kirk. And do I think there's another level to this offense with Kevin O'Connell compared to Zimmer and Kubiak? Absolutely. But I feel like we're going to have to be so perfect with our limited resources of cap space and limited draft picks. So I don't know. Let's keep reading these here because we're not going to come to like some concrete, epiphany here. This is all still in motion too, by the way.
Yeah.
But I think we both agree that it's not just, all right, Kwesi, the job is yours. You're running the show solo here. Right. Landon McGuire via the YouTube comment section says, I literally cannot imagine life without SKOR North. Thanks for all the hard work. It's appreciated. Thank you, Landon.
Thank you, Landon.
It's awesome to hear that. Roger Deere via the SKOR North app. What was that mini press conference all about yesterday. What was Kwesi trying to do with the roster? So he decided not to take questions yesterday.
Yeah.
KOC got up there and rocked back and forth like he was a nervous fourth grader, introducing his pet frog for show and tell. Neither of these guys gives off an aura of confidence. I know they're new at it, but come on, getting rid of Danielle Hunter for anything other than a first-round pick and more is not good for the Vikings. Rick Spielman left the toilet plugged.
Dang.
That's actually pretty good at the end.
I don't think they lack confidence. I don't think they lack confidence.
So
they know what they're doing.
O'Connell didn't bug me at all. Kwesi said that he's going to take questions. I think he said he's going to do a press conference next week, which I'll be very curious. Yeah, the confidence thing, I don't know. Because, was Rick great? It's not like they fired a guy who I thought was the embodiment of greatness at the podium, right? So I guess I don't. I really want to hear their explanation, or as much as they're going to eventually say about what they have or have not done. But yeah, the confidence thing, I'm not like, oh, these guys, Mike and Rick were great at the podium and these two stink. I just don't feel that way.
Yeah. Steve Weiner via the SKOR North app says, Vikings best move in free agency, the Packers trading Davante Adams to the Raiders.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's not wrong.
Dan Van Halen via the SKOR North app says, with the Davante Adams trade, maybe the Vikings are trying to win with Justin Jefferson on a rookie contract. So he is up for an extension next year, but then that extension won't really kick in on the books for another year or two. So they do have 2 or 3 years of Justin Jefferson on a major discount. And I don't think they're actively saying, okay, we got to go all in while but yeah, like when you have a player that good, it's not quite like having a quarterback like a Justin Herbert or a Joe Burrow on a rookie scale contract. But when you have a player that's that good and that impactful on a rookie scale contract, it's super helpful. And it does allow you the luxury of maybe overpaying at a couple other positions, like they probably are at quarterback. So, yeah.
I fear that comment is exactly correct too, because the one way to not win a championship is to say, well, the Packers might be down. Let's win the division. That's exactly what this show is sick of. That is the definition of our whole thing of win a Super Bowl before we die, because you know what? We've won in this town a lot of division titles.
Yep. And yes, you do have to win your division if you want to play home games in the playoffs, and it is a necessary, I think, prerequisite. Not that you can't win it as a wild card, but like winning 4 non-home games is a lot harder than winning a division and maybe getting home field or whatever. But to me, the bar in the NFC, the Packers are one of those teams. They're a little lower now than they were a day ago because of Davante Adams. But you got to compare yourself to the Rams, to the Buccaneers, and to the Packers. And I would say the 49ers as well.
Yes, best teams.
And it's easy for people to say, well, what do you mean? The Rams, Matthew Stafford. We got to stop doing that. Matthew Stafford's on a different planet against pressure as a leader until Kirk proves otherwise, and maybe new leadership will unlock something there. Kev via Twitter says, if the Vikings could have snuck into the playoffs last year, they could have won the Super Bowl. It was anyone's game, as evidenced by the Chiefs, Packers, and Bucks getting knocked out at home. So who gives a bleep how they get in? Just get in.
Excuse me, what? Are you...
Excuse me?
No. Did you watch the playoffs?
The 7th seed was pretty atrocious. Well,
what would have happened if the Vikings would have snuck in and played 3 road NFC playoff games against the best teams in the world? Would they have had a chance to win the Super Bowl?
No.
God, no.
0 chance.
No chance.
I agree.
They might have won 1 game. And then did you, Kev, is that the right guy?
Yeah.
Kev? Yeah. Did you see the quarterback play? Like, we saw some phenomenal play. So the first weekend I thought was good, not great. After that, my God, no.
I would add too,
I can't do that. I'm
not going to put it all on Cousins, but like, what evidence have you seen to this point that Cousins or the Vikings, as constructed, are capable of rattling off 4 straight non-home victories against the best teams in the world, right? Like, it's not as simple as sneaking in. You don't just sneak in. Well, what about the Packers as a wild card team 10 years ago? Well, they had an all-time great in Aaron Rodgers. There are outliers. What about the Ravens? Okay, But do you want to be modeling yourself after outliers, or do you want to swing big?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean, but oh my God.
Anton from North Dakota via the SKOR North app, and his question, by the way, is going to be presented by our friends at Mayo Clinic. So, Mayo Clinic Men's Health is the subject here, and they are accepting new patients, and they will see men of all ages. If you're a new patient in southern Minnesota, the Rochester Clinic, or Minneapolis. And it could be anything from urinary conditions, prostate issues, cancer screenings, cancer treatment. You can request an appointment at menshealth.mayoclinic.org. That's menshealth.mayoclinic.org. Anton from North Dakota via the SKOR North app says, I'm a daily listener. I absolutely love the show. Thank you. As I've been listening to the confusion and head-scratching moves this week about the Vikings, I had this interesting thought. Have you seen the movie Moneyball? Great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be this guy, but the book is great too. The GM started making moves based on analytics, and everybody thought he was an idiot and was going to wreck the team. Perhaps our new GM is just like Billy Beane. He has some sort of algorithm figured out, and he's going to end up looking like a genius. I will say, I think everything you said is applicable, except for the Kirk Cousins thing. The Kirk Cousins thing is not an analytically, algorithmically sound signing. They're doing that. They're doing that because it's comfortable, and they're doing that because, hey, there's not another option that's ironclad better than Kirk Cousins, so they're just going to put that piece in place and then hopefully use all the knowledge that you speak about with Kwesi to maximize their success of filling the rest of the roster. That's my take on it. But re-signing Kirk Cousins is not an analytically sound
which is why I don't think it's the GM's first choice. That's what I'm saying is it feels like we're trying to piece together the roster, and the GM has control of most of it, or some of it, but not all of it. So that's the thing is, can you build when you have people basically coming in and attempting to, I guess, call the shots on some very important spots, and then the GM is being allowed to fulfill his plan elsewhere, but not everywhere. What's the result?
Yeah. Yep. No, I think the analytically sound move in the NFL is drafting a quarterback successfully and then building a monster roster around that cheap contract, like the Chargers are doing, like the Bengals are doing, like the Seahawks did 10 years ago. Right? Like that's the Ravens. I mean, hell, Lamar Jackson makes like $3 million. Look at it,
But like if you went bridge, if you had traded Kirk, and for 2022 went bridge guy, okay, who's not paid well, but and he's good, he's not great. But then you could start to build out the rest of your team around him with an eye towards drafting one. To me, that lands you in a far better spot to potentially win a championship, not in 22, but then in the next couple of years than this does.
Well, what would you rather have? Let's take this sort of rumored, because the Vikings and Browns were apparently having discussions. Probably would like to still be having discussions because now the Browns are back open for business. But if let's say there are 2 second-round picks on the table, a 2022 and a 2023 second-round pick, and then I guess Baker would have to come back in that deal. So, but let me frame it this way. Let's say there's a team out there, Colts, Browns, Panthers, where you could get like a second and a third or 2 seconds for Kirk Cousins and cap freedom. And you could sign Marcus Mariota for $8 million.
Right.
Would you rather have Marcus Mariota and 2 additional good draft picks, or just Kirk Cousins for more money? When you tee it up that way, it makes no sense, right?
Right.
Unless you think, we can win a Super Bowl in 2022-23 with Kirk and Kevin O'Connell, which is what I think they think.
Well, I think somebody has deluded themselves in a haze of something to think that, but that's a crazy thought. And just to be absolutely clear on what I think we're all in agreement on, we are not saying get Marcus Mariota to win a championship. We are saying it's part of the process. Like, if you're going to do this right, it's a process. It's not a quick fix. It's a process of, and if you could start to build your team out again right now, and Kirk is not there, it makes way more sense. But Phil, your point I think is a perfect one, which is this: you hired an analytically driven person to build your roster, and now at the most important position, you are not at all going along with what we think is how he thinks.
Don't
so,
you
like,
think?
Explain that.
Does it feel to you guys like Vikings ownership still needs to be convinced that Kirk Cousins, like they don't know? It's like they don't know on Kirk Cousins, right? And there's a case to be made, right? He's never really been paired, well, the last 4 years, he was definitely paired with offensive people in Washington. But that organization, there's always an excuse because they're a train wreck.
Right.
But it kind of feels to me like, we don't really know for sure. So can we kind of just see for the next couple years while you retool in and around him and still push for a Super Bowl? Like,
right.
That's weird, dude.
It feels more like the devil they know versus the devil they don't.
Yeah.
Like they're more scared of the life after Kirk Cousins. So I think it's more they look at it as like, no, why would we get rid of this guy? We know what we're getting out of him. And we also were held back by the Grim Reaper that was Zim, right? It was all this infrastructure and bad external situations and missed kicks and penalties and fluky ways to lose games. We don't want to move off of Kirk. It's them having the fear that if they moved on from Kirk Cousins, what's going to happen to our franchise?
Literally after an era where they went to the playoffs with 11 and 13 win seasons with Teddy Bridgewater and Case Keenum, which is hilarious to me. But what are we going to do without Kirk? Make the playoffs and win 11 games like you did before? I don't know.
It feels like somebody got to the Wilfs and convinced them that Mike and Rick screwed the pooch completely and that with them gone, it's going to be fine. And I would say they screwed the pooch, but so did other people. And you're saying, but we're going to bring those people back. But what I really genuinely don't get is this one. Why would you shift to Kwesi, who clearly has a different mindset, different ideas, different way of thinking, if you are going to squash what we think he is probably thinking at his most important spot? Like it would be like the poll ads telling Falvey, job is yours, but we got some real thoughts about pitching too.
Yeah, I would want some assurances if I was being guided in that direction from the people that hired me, right? I would want some assurances that, okay, I believe that we may need to do something drastically different, but if you're insisting on exploring this path, then I need some assurances that if it doesn't work, I'm not to blame. that I get to then do it my way in a year or two.
Yeah.
And we get to hit the reset button. David Bruss via the SKOR North app says, do you believe that the core group of veterans can win a Super Bowl? There is a losing culture in that locker room. Show me one veteran that has the leadership to take this to the next level. I actually disagree with this a little bit. Do I think this current core group as constructed at their current ages can win a Super Bowl?
Yep.
Boy, you'd have to, show me the two cornerbacks that are coming in. Like if you can be flawless in your acquisition of players via free agency in the next couple weeks and draft, okay. But on the flip side, because I think they've aged out. Like a lot of these guys are in their early 30s now. But on the flip side, do I think Harrison Smith is I don't think it's his fault that the Viking, he's a borderline Hall of Fame player. Adam Thielen has been one of the greatest wide receivers in Vikings history. These players are absolute winning players on a winning team in their prime. Eric Kendrick, same way. I worry that they're all emerging out of their prime now, and you're still trying to run it back. That's my problem with it.
And these guys were also part of what, back in 2017 was a marvelous chemistry. That team was great. I think the last 2 or 3 years, 2 years especially, have in some ways soured things here. And again, it comes back to a very simple sports thing. Sometimes change is necessary and you don't have to fault people. You don't have to say, well, this guy sucks now, or in the locker room, he's terrible. Sometimes you run your course in sports. That's how sports works. So I think that the question that you just read is a really astute one, because I feel like this team, as constructed, that they are now clearly trying to run back, has run its course. Age, things went wrong. They clearly are not as tight. I'm sorry, but they're just not. Like you don't watch a year like last year and say those guys all still really they are in sync. They're not.
Yeah.
So that's a fantastic point. But I think it can be done without blame. I think it can be done with change needs to be made. And I also could see taking a longer look at guys, but the reality is this. I really think the quicker that you want to get this team on the right track, the sooner that you make changes, the better. So like if you could say, well, I want to look at Thielen and I want to look at Kendricks and I want to look at this guy and that guy, I'd say, okay, that's fine. But the problem with that, Phil, is it's going to, in some ways, slow your ability for growth.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I don't love, like with the Thielen restructure, it's a new contract because he had to agree to a void year in 2025. And the Kirk contract, I don't love that they are putting dead money, meaning these guys are off. These guys are off your team, but you're still paying against the salary cap in 2025. Yes. It's so easy right now to be like, it's 3 years down the road. Who gives a rip? Yeah, but when you're trying to build your team 3 years from now and you're still paying against the cap for players that have no business like trying to compete for a Super Bowl right now. Again, if they sign J.C. Treader to be a center, I need to rethink some of this stuff because now you're fixing one of the weakest links of your entire team.
Right.
But in the absence of something like that, which they have not done yet, all of this is head scratching. So.
And I am, and just my biggest thing is this. I am anti let's run it back. I really thought that you brought in different people to not do that.
Mm-hmm.
So like this whole thing of, well, we'll put together a veteran team and now look, Davante's gone in Green Bay. And so we could be competitive in, okay, we've been there before, guys. We've seen this before. We've seen this picture show before. Guess what we want? Something that in the, in at least for you two, your lifetime, you've never seen.
Yeah.
A Super
Say
Bowl.
what you will about the Bears too, but they have, with Poles trading away Khalil Mack and them gutting that roster and starting that rebuild, as it stands right now, they have $132 million in cap space for next season. $132 million in cap space.
There's probably also other restructures that they can.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's the Vikings right now have a bottom 5 cap situation for next year. And it's going to keep and they keep jamming money.
Yeah, the void years thing is that's not a positive.
Yeah. One more here. Jack Phyla via the SKOR North app says, why can't the following be true under better coaching, scheming, and play calling? And he's got 6 or 7 points here. Number 1, the quarterback is better with a head coach that works with him. Could see that. The offensive line with 2 firsts and 2 seconds over the next 2 years and a third with an average of age of 24 moves from the bottom third of the league to at least average or better. The offense returns as is, except Irv Smith replaces Conklin, which he's better, and they move up into the top 10 in offense. Defense drops Pierce but keeps Hunter and Phillips, and they add a couple cornerbacks and an edge rusher in the draft, etc.
This is the problem.
Defense moves from 29th to 20th by not collapsing in the final 2 minutes of halves. And the Vikings win 3 to 4 more games than last year and have a puncher's chance in the playoffs with a dangerous offense and 2 dangerous pass rushers if they can find someone. But I mean, if you went through any of those one things individually, this is where my poker, I used to play poker and was in the poker industry for a few years. Any one of these things is realistic. But when you're going through a poker tournament and there's 1,000 players and you get aces dealt to you 10 times, you are a heavy favorite in each of those instances. But are you a heavy favorite for all 10 of those to go your way? No. Right. So, all of these things on their own, all 7 of these things you listed, absolutely on their own. But are all 7 of them going to line up perfectly?
Right.
Probably not.
Well, and where are you going to? And the thing, too, is so let's say O'Connell and Kirk are great together. Let's say that works. Absolutely works. And Kirk takes off. And Kirk can be great then. Okay. The problem is the defensive stuff he suggested is all hope.
Yeah.
Okay, draft a guy from the edge, and then you're going to draft a corner who's going to be really, really good. Like that is nothing more than hope.
Mm-hmm.
And the draft is what? It's a crapshoot.
Yep.
So that's the problem.
Yep. So, all right. Well, there we go. A little feedback Friday. Just trying to sort
Packers.
through all this, figure it out.
Take that, Pack.
And we will be all over anything that happens on Purple Daily throughout the weekend too. So check out. And if you missed any of our episodes this week, reacting to breaking news and speculating on things, you can always
We
find
did get
us.
one Twins question. I mean, I thought we'd be inundated. Baseball started, baby.
I think I went through 250 or 300 questions via the SKOR North app over the past few days.
Okay.
I didn't see one Twins question.
Really? Oh, I was being sarcastic. Oh my
I didn't know.
God.
Like, it wasn't like I ignored 10 Twins questions and didn't bring them to the show. We didn't get a Twins question that I saw.
Happy opening day, Declan. Have fun.
Yeah, I'll be
Target
there.
Field.
$13 beers. I'm ready to rock. Let's go.
Oh my
All
God.
right, Mackie and Judd, thanks for hanging out with us. See you guys next week.